Okay, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to link the patch notes in the description below. Oh, hi, by the way, guys. I forgot to introduce myself again. I'm Excoundrel. I am a TFT YouTuber. I have started TFT in set 3, hit Master Tier, tilted out of Master Tier, now nearly back in Master Tier. I'm still learning and growing with you guys, but I feel like I've got a lot of pedigree in auto chess, and I think it's good enough for me to be able to start to give you guys advice on how I learn to play things, and that hopefully helps you guys learn to play things as well. What I'm going to be doing is I am going to be talking about the TFT 10.9 patch notes. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to link the patch notes in the description below. You guys can read through it. I am not going to read through the specific changes. I'm going to talk about the general themes, because if I read through the specific changes on this patch note video, it will take 20 minutes or more, and I can't afford to do that, because we're also going to be talking about the meta compositions on this update, and we're going to be doing individual guides on lots of different meta compositions, and then we're going to be putting those timestamps in the description below. This will be the first patch where I have theory crafted some builds. We are going to talk about at the end some builds that could be good. I'm going to talk about builds that I think have been good from PBE. I'm going to talk about builds that I think will still be good despite the changes. And then I'm going to also mention builds that have been gutted. So things like Bang Bros have been gutted. But I'm essentially going to be talking about comps that I think will work, and I'm going to put them in order of tiers as well. These tier lists might not work out. Things change very rapidly. But I think definitely we have got a really cool meta coming up, and I hope that it has some sort of variance and some interest as well. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to go through the patch notes. I'm going to briefly touch on what these patch notes means. I'm not going to talk about the individual changes. You can read those in the description yourself. I'll link you, and then we're going to do some meta compositions and do some team builder stuff. So hopefully it's a good video for you. Hopefully you find it useful, and let's go through the patch notes. So this is the overall buff and nerf sheet. You guys can pause it on the screen here and have a look if you want to. What we're going to do is we're going to go through and talk about the changes. I'm going to highlight changes. I'm not going to talk about them out loud, because actually taking the time to read them would mean a lot of video just spent reading what you can see on screen. First of all, the new galaxies. They look awesome. I very much like the Yasuo one. I'm kind of like a clean, like the Jinx one's a bit messy. I much prefer the clean cut stuff. This looks awesome. All of these galaxies look amazing. I'm 100% buying the Yasuo one. It's insanely good. So yeah, let's start off with some system changes that have changed a lot about how compositions can work, and is massively affecting some of the major meta compositions on this update. Okay, so these changes are actually pretty huge. Basically, they are changing the way the levels affect the champion drop rates. It used to be that specifically towards level 4, 5, 6, and even 7, the champion drop rates were weighted towards 2 and 3 costs over 1 costs. They are shifting a huge amount of percentage drop chance into 1 costs, and they're taking it away from 3 and 2 costs. 4 costs remain unchanged, and so do 5 costs. What this means is that reroll compositions like Space Jam, Protector reroll, Mech Pilot, Bang Bros, all of these comps are actually going to be much harder to achieve your 3-star 3 costs and your 2-star 3 costs, because the percentage drop chances are being nerfed significantly in favor of 1 costs. It means you'll be able to 3-star your 1 costs more easily, but it will mean that you're less likely to find your 2 and 3 costs, which is huge, actually huge, because it essentially makes it much harder to consistently achieve the 3-star 2-cost, 3-cost builds, and that basically nerfs all reroll builds. Every single reroll build is getting nerfed off the back of this. Okay, we also have item and drop changes. Essentially, this is just to allow you to have space on your bench. In terms of items, there is a limited amount of item slots you can have in TFT, and if you go over that limit, items were getting deleted. That just means that you won't. This is another big change. Now all players drop at least 1 small orb in the PvE rounds at the beginning. This basically means you're guaranteed to get gold or champions, which you can sell for gold. So that's important. It just means we can be a bit more fair across the board. 2 new galaxies. Treasure Trove, everything drops loot orbs, which means gold and items for everybody. And Star Cluster means tier 1, 2, and 3 champions at the carousel are 2-star, which is going to make it interesting. You might choose a champion over an item. We'll have to see how those galaxies play out. It's difficult to see, to say really. And they've just changed the galaxy odds as well. Less likely to get a normal game, more likely to get one of the random galaxies. So more fun for everybody with the galaxies. I personally like normal games, but there are some galaxies which I do enjoy, so. Okay, guys, there are a few things here that essentially we're talking about all of the traits. So the traits are getting essentially nerfed at the higher levels, but buffed at the lower levels. So I think TFT talked about it in bronze, silver, and gold traits. Bronze traits are getting buffed a lot of the time, but silver and gold traits are being nerfed most of the time. Okay, so Blademasters, they're being nerfed at 6. Blasters are being nerfed at 4. Brawlers are being nerfed at 4 but buffed at 2, so they get 50 extra health at 2, but they get 50 less health at 4. Celestial nerfed at 4 and 6. Cybernetic nerfed at 6, but only slightly, not a huge amount. Darkstar nerfed at 3 and 4, but unchanged at 6. Sorry, they're getting nerfed at 3 and 6, but unchanged at 9. Infiltrator, buffed at 2, nerfed at 4 and 6. Protector, they are nerfed at 2. No, they're buffed at 2, and then unchanged at 4, which is the most common amount of protectors, and then they are nerfed at 6. Rebels, they are nerfed at, I think that's 6 and 9. And sorcerers are nerfed at 4, 6, and 8. Star Guardians are nerfed at 6. Vanguards are buffed at 2 and unchanged at 4. Aurelion Soul's getting a buff, and Valkyrie is being nerfed slightly. What this means is that the traditional compositions, like 4 Blasters, 4 Brawlers, are actually getting an overall nerf. So 4 Blasters, 4 Brawlers is going to take a big hit here. I think like Protectors with Celestials and Space Jam are getting nerfed. Blademaster, if you're playing 6 Blademaster, is getting nerfed. Darkstar is getting smashed, like especially 6 Darkstar is getting smashed pretty hard. They got smashed 2 patches in a row now. Rebels are getting hit. Sorcerers are getting hit. Star Guardians at 6 are getting hit as well. A lot of the big combination traits are getting changed so that you can't play them as effectively anymore. There's some other tiny adjustments here. Blademasters increases the speed of the bonus attacks, which actually is a good quality of life change. I think that's actually pretty good, especially for 3 Blademasters, so it's going to be good for Kayle. Chrono is getting reworked. So instead of giving 15, 30, 35, 75% attack speed every 4 seconds, it is giving you 15% attack speed every 8, 4, and 2 when you increase the traits. But the first tick applies immediately at the start of combat. So by putting Chrono in, you get a 15% attack speed bonus right at the start. So that's a buff to the early parts of Chrono, but a nerf to the later ends of Chrono. So Chrono will not be as good in the early game now because they're going to get less effectiveness out of their attack speed because it's essentially every 8 seconds at 2. So 2 Chrono actually gets a pretty solid nerf here as a splash. And Mech Pilot is getting gutted. Like Mech Pilot is getting health nerf, health contribution nerf, and the Mech Pilots get 0 mana when they come out of the mech. So that's a big nerf to mechs again. And I don't think the Infiltrator buff is going to make up for it because it gets nerfed at 4. So Mech Infiltrator, pretty hard hit after this update. In terms of the changes to 1-cost champions, they're actually improving a lot of 1-cost champions at 3-star specifically. So Fiora's Riposte is going up to 3 seconds at 3-star. Graves is being nerfed at 1-star, kept the same at 2-star, but is being buffed at 3-star. Kha'Zix is being buffed at 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star, so he's getting a pretty significant buff. Leona is getting buffed at 3-star pretty significantly. Malphite is getting buffed at 3-star. Twisted Fate is getting buffed at 3-star by a little bit. And Ziggs is being buffed at 3-star. Well, he's being buffed across the board, actually, 1, 2-star, and 3-star, actually pretty significantly as well. So they're actually making a lot of 1-cost 3-star champions very powerful. Specifically, I think Fiora is going to be very good. I think that Malphite will be great. Kha'Zix could even be good. But yeah, I think Fiora especially is going to be a really solid 3-star 1-cost. There are a couple of tier 2 champion changes. Annie's being buffed. Lucian will now double tap even if his target dies, which is actually really important because that was a massive bug that was causing Lucian to be worse than he was. This is actually a small Lucian buff. Sona is getting a healing buff, but actually is only going to cleanse stuns rather than all debuffs. So she won't cleanse things like Morello's, she won't cleanse things like red buff, which is actually a pretty big nerf for Sona. Rakan is going to attack the farthest range with an attack range +1 hex, which is still the same as 3 hexes, I think, to a Rakan. But if you give him a rapid fire cannon, he's obviously going to go across the entire board. Yasuo is changed so that he's attacking the farthest unit with an attack range +2 hexes, the same as Rakan. So Rakan and Yasuo might target the same person, for instance, if they're on the board together. So those are some big changes, and that's also going to really, I think, massively gut Bang Bros, because no longer will Yasuo essentially assassinate the highest item carry. Okay, so Master Yi is getting a buff at 1 and 2 star, but a nerf at 3 star, and he was only ever good at 3 stars, so he might be used in some more Blademaster comps, but I genuinely think Bang Bros as a build is kind of dead. Not only has Sona got nerfed, Yasuo got changed, which I think is actually a nerf overall, and Yi also got nerfed. So I think this is actually a huge nerf to Bang Bros, and I think Bang Bros will no longer be as viable. Rumble, I think, to compensate for some mech changes, is getting pretty huge buffs in terms of damage, but I don't think it's good enough. Jinx is getting buffed to compensate for, especially at 2 star and 1 star, to compensate for some blaster changes. Aurelion Sol is being buffed pretty heavily, so maybe we see some more Rebel gameplay. Gangplank is being buffed, as well as if you upgrade his fast impact, he's going to have a really quick impact of his ultimate. Xerath is being nerfed, and I think that needed to happen. So Xerath is getting nerfed, but Aurelion Sol and Gangplank are getting buffed. Some other big changes that I think are going to, again, be a nerf to Bang Bros and be a nerf to Mech is that Quicksilver is having its overall duration reduced by 1/3. So a big nerf to Mech and to Yi specifically. And there are some bug fixes. I won't go too much into those. But yeah, so essentially, the main takeaways from these patch notes is that Bang Bros is gutted. Most reroll comps are getting hit. Mech Infiltrator is gutted. And I think we're going to see some emergence of 3-star 1-cost builds, a little bit like we saw in Set 2. So there are a couple of good Kayle comps out right now, and I think the Kayle comps are only going to get better with the immediate attack speed buff that they're going to be giving Kayle. So let's talk a little bit about Kayle. So this is the Kayle, essentially the Kayle Blademaster, Chrono comp. So you're going to want to have Xayah, who's kind of just like your bait. She carries your Kayle items in the early game, and then you get her in later on to provide the Celestial bonus. So we're going to have her. We're going to have Misfortune, of course. Misfortune is going to be obviously providing the Valkyrie bonus. If you don't find her, you obviously could go for Kai'Sa, but I would say Misfortune's better. Your Prime carry, which is going to be Kayle, of course. She's the most important. And then we're going to have Kassadin, obviously, for the he gives you a bit of team utility. He also provides you with the Celestial bonus. And then we're going to have some of our Chronos, and that will be not Blitzcrank. It's going to be Ezreal for the Blaster bonus. So the Ezreal provides the Blaster bonus. You can put Xayah wherever you want, really. You're going to have Wukong, the most important Chrono. We are going to have Shen, who gives us the Blademaster, wherever Shen is. Where's Shen? Where's my boy Shen gone? Here he is. And then we're going to have one more. So obviously you can start with Blitzcrank. I think starting with Blitzcrank is perfectly fine. But then you're going to cut Blitzcrank for Thresh eventually, because that Thresh gives you the Mana Reaver bonus, which is great. So this is what the overall comp looks like. You can have Kayle kind of protected a little bit further at the back line here if you want to, but it kind of does, you need to maneuver your position around. In terms of itemization, Kayle's like ultimate items, and especially now that the attack speed buff has come through, I think you want Gwynsu's, I think you want GA, and then most people like Hand of Justice. So Hand of Justice is really good, but Kayle can work with lots of items. I recommend that you try things out. Any attack speed items are going to be good on Kayle. Any kind of mana items that allow her to cast more quickly will be fine. But this is obviously going to be a great comp coming into the next update, especially with the Chrono buffs. The other thing that you can add eventually is the Vanguard bonus for Wukong. So if you're going to go to level 9, I would just recommend adding a random Jace, wherever that boy is. Can't find him. I can never find Jace. Oh, there he is. You could just add a random Jace to get the Vanguard bonus for Wukong if you really want to at level. You can go for it at level 9. So that would be my Kayle comp. So the original Brawler Blaster, I think, actually has an interesting change that you can go for. You can actually go to level 9, and then I would recommend adding in the new Aurelion Sol and trying to get him to 2-star, and giving him any kind of items like a Morellonomicon, for instance, or a Jeweled Gauntlet or a Rabadon Death Cap or anything, right? Because then you get the 3 Rebel bonus, which is pretty solid for the Jinx and the Aurelion Sol. And I think this is a good level 9 composition. People were doing this anyway, but I think this is like a good way to play Brawler Blasters if you can get to level 9. Plus, if you can 3-star Graves and 3-star Malphite, they're actually super strong now. So, you know, I would consider this as another really good Brawler Blaster. I like to have some kind of like Quicksilver on MF to avoid getting Blitzcrank hooked. But yeah, this is what I would recommend for if you're going for Brawler Blaster. It's like a really good updated version of the Brawler Blaster build. So with 2 Vanguards and 4 Chrono being like a really interesting way to play, especially with Wukong being a Vanguard, what I wanted to have a look at was about essentially a 4 Blaster, 2 Brawler, 4 Chrono build with 2 Vanguards. It's really crazy. I know it's kind of got a lot going on for it. I don't know if it will be any better than traditional Brawler Blaster, but let's kind of take a look at it. So you want Blitzcrank in, of course. He's really good to help Jinx start to get the resets. The 2 Chrono that you would go for would be Wukong. Then you're going to add in Cho'Gath because he provides you with your... Sorry, 4 Chrono, one of the... 4 Chrono, but Cho'Gath provides you obviously with your CC. You kind of want Wukong there as well. You want a Vanguard to go with Wukong. Now, in my opinion, the best Vanguard that you can get is Jace. So you might be able to just throw a random Jace in there, which would work really well with Graves, especially in the early game because you can combo the Space Pirates early on. So this is actually something that could work really well. You kind of have to spread things out across the front line a little bit. You might even move Blitzcrank to the back, for instance, and then have these guys like this. And then obviously you want the blasters then. So you want Misfortune. And then you're going to want Ezreal for the 4th Chrono. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is going to be what the level 4 composition would look like. I actually think it's really interesting. I think it might be... I don't know if it's going to be any better than traditional Blaster Brawler, but it's something that I'm definitely going to try out. I think it could be really good. And obviously items on Jinx remain the same, realistically. So you're going to want to have Giant Slayers wherever they are. I think the best items for Jinx is Giant Slayers over Red Buff, because then you're going to give Red Buff to someone like Ezreal. If Misfortune has a Quicksilver, you just give her that. And you could put a Blitzcrank above Jinx like this and just have a Blitzcrank pull someone in. But this is the way I think about playing it. Could be a really interesting comp. I'm going to talk about original Blaster Brawlers, but I actually really like the idea of this one right here. Because it's got a lot of CC. You've got Jace to give the Vanguard bonus over to Wukong. You're going to have the Space Pirate bonus for a lot of the game. And then you've got this as a core blaster. I'm actually really interested to try this one out. I think it could be good. So, of course, I think 6 Cybernetic are going to be perfectly fine. It's a pretty simple build to play. Fiora, Leona, who are both really good at 3 stars. If you can 3-star them in Cybernetics now, I mean, that's really strong. There might even be a world where you actually play for reroll sort of the 3-star 1 cost in Cybernetics and then push to 8 for the 6 Cybernetics build. But if you can get them to 3-star, fantastic. Obviously, Lucian, wherever he is. You're going to want Vi, wherever she is. You will want Irelia, who goes somewhere behind the back line. You want her at 2-star. And obviously, you're going to want Echo. Now, there's a couple of extra splashes that you can do here. Most people like to add another Blademaster. I actually think there's a lot of people like to do 2 things. They like to add a Blaster and a Blademaster. I think there is... So you can play the traditional one, which I'll link right now, which is Kayle. Where's Kayle? You add Kayle in usually. And then you also add in Misfortune. That's like this is like the traditional Cybernetics comp. So I'm just gonna make sure I put on like Aurelia 2 Infinity Edges is like absolute, and then you just have random item components on the rest of them. So let me just do this one, and then there is an adjusted version which I think could be good on this next update. 6 Cyber Valk. And there's going to be an adjusted one, which I think could be good on this update, because obviously you don't need to have Kayle for the Blademasters. Oh wait, I gave those to Kayle. Right, we're gonna reshare with the items on the right champion. Putting double Infinity Edge on Kayle. I'm baiting everybody playing this composition. Okay, there is another version which I think could be pretty good as well. So you drop the Kayle and you drop the Misfortune. And what you could have is instead, you could have Shen, and you could have Irelia just behind the Shen, and you could have Ezreal to give you the blaster bonus if you have red buff on Lucian especially. So if you have like red buff on Lucian, this is really good. So I actually think this could be a really, really good version of the composition. So you have the immediate 15% attack speed, and then especially if you get the infiltrator talents for Irelia, you know, with the Echo, like you're looking at a huge attack speed buff for Irelia straight away. So I think this could be a good version of the Cyber composition as well. The other way that you could play it is by having Thresh in instead of Ezreal for the Mana Reaver. But you could do that at 9, for instance. But I think this is another good version of the composition that could be pretty strong. 2. So even though reroll comps got nerfed, I think obviously Bang Bros has been pretty hard hit, but I genuinely do think that Space Jam is still going to be very good. I know that sounds really stupid, but I do genuinely think Space Jam is going to be very good. If you can get the 3 stars necessary. It'll be harder to do so, but I think that you can still play Space Jam really easily. So we're going to talk about Space Jam now. I have got a guide in it on the channel that I put up yesterday, but there wasn't any major nerfs to Space Jam, and actually Jace got an indirect buff, or even a direct buff, because of the changes to the Vanguard. So yes, okay, Force Celestial got nerfed, but actually as a whole, I do believe that that Space Jam has been kind of like left alone. And even if you get to level 7, you can add the Wukong. And then even if you get to level 8, you can add 2 Chrono to get an immediate attack speed bonus, which is always really nice. So I actually do think that overall Space Jam has been relatively untouched. And so I will talk about Space Jam and what I think is good. Darius, I think you just want to slam him with 2 Rabadons, and then whatever you want after that. It could be defensive, it could be offensive. I actually really like Jace with Zeke, because I think Zeke's is a very underrated item, and I think it's a great item to have. And I just think you put like Bramble and Dragonclaw on him. But you know, this is the way I'd look at playing it. Something like this. I do think Space Jam is still relatively untouched. If you can make it work for you, I think it's still going to be a good build. It is a build that has been very, very... only minor changes have come through from Space Jam, so I think it's still going to be a build that's going to be good. Unlike Bang Bros, which I think is basically dead, I think that Space Jam is still going to be very good. So I think the traditional Egirls comp is dead. However, I actually still think they haven't changed Sona too much that affects this particular composition, and I also think they haven't changed Chalice. So if you can get the items for it, I think if you're going to play Sorcerers or Star Guardians, I think you have to play the Mana Printer Sona version. So you want Sona to 2-star, and then you're looking for obviously the full Egirl collection, which is Syndra, it is Poppy, it is Zoe. Where's Zoe? Here. It is Ari. And then it is Nico. You want up here. And then it's Soraka. Okay. So what you do is you basically, and you don't want her 3-star. You basically have this as your base. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of your Star Guardians, and what you need is very item specific. You can't really do it with any less than this items. You need at least 2 Chalices on Sona, and then you have an option. I personally prefer Xeraths and 2 Chalices, which means you need a total of 4 Tears and 2 Negatron Cloaks. A little bit hard to achieve sometimes. But you could go for the Star Guardian Spatula on Sona as well, and it works fine. The reason I like this more so than anything else is that you can add in a Lux, and actually this makes Lux like super good because she just constantly spams her ability. 3 stars, you're aiming for 3-star Sona, 3-star Syndra, and 3-star Nico. In terms of items, I like to give Trap Claw over to Syndra so she can block a single ability and keep using her stuff. And then I like to give any kind of defensive items over to Nico. I like GA, I actually really like Morellonomicon, and I like Bramble Vest. But you could get rid of the GA for a Dragon's Claw, but you'd need a lot of Negatron Cloaks, and honestly, Negatron Cloaks should be prioritized for Chalices. So GA works perfectly fine as well. I think that this version of the build is better than anything else. I think it is just the best version of the build that you can get. I think that the traditional Syndra carrying mana items is not good, and I don't think it will be good since the Star Guardian nerf either. So I think this is the build that will still have legs, and I think this is the build that you're going to have to use to make work. So I will recommend this one. You can play other mana Printer Sona builds, including the Void version, but I just think that this is the more effective version. Nico is just so incredibly strong, and Nico basically carries your games with this particular build. So obviously Darkstar are going to be perfectly fine still. I don't think they're going to be as good as they were, but I still think that Xerath and Jhin are going to be fine carries. Jhin especially because he wasn't really touched on the last update. So Darkstar is pretty easy. You go to level 7 and you have your 6 Darkstars. You have Karma, you have Jhin, who needs to be 2-star, really. Jhin needs to be 2-star. And then obviously you can throw in Shaco, but he is really not that good right now, and I would recommend replacing Shaco for Xerath as soon as you find him. Honestly, Shaco is actually a very mediocre... well, actually, that's a lie. I think Shaco's fine. I actually would replace Mordekaiser over Shaco, but still have Shaco just in there somewhere. You want him to die, but he probably does a bit more damage than Mordekaiser does. And then you want to have Xerath in, because Xerath is much better. As soon as you find Xerath, realistically, with items, you kind of want to put Karma attached with him, which is why when it comes to itemization, it's really nice to have a Trap Claw on Jhin. So Trap Claw and Runans is kind of like my go-to for Jhin. Then when it comes to Xerath, like the ideal items are things like Rapid Fire Cannon, or Rabadons, you know, for instance, as well. These are like really good items for him. That's what you're aiming for overall. And that would be like your mainstay composition. And then you kind of want to add Celestial. So at level 8, you would add in Lulu, and that would give you Mystic and Celestial. And then Lulu's just really strong as well with this comp. You don't really care about Shaco, but it's Shaco or Mordekaiser, it doesn't really matter. But I think that Jarvan in general is a bit more useful, because if he gets his ult off, he gives attack speed to everybody, whereas with Mordekaiser, he's just kind of useless. So that's the way I'd play this composition overall. Another build that I feel could be strong on this update is Rebels again. Yes, believe it or not, Rebels again will be really strong. I'm going to go through the Rebel compositions. So Ziggs, we're going to add him. If you can get him to 3-star, he's going to be good, but otherwise, don't worry about it. Sona, keep her in, even though she got nerfed. We can have Yasuo. We can have Malphite. We can have Master Yi. Where's Master Yi? Master Yi, if we really want. Then we want Jinx. And Jinx can either go here or here, depending on what happens, because eventually you're going to get... there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Eventually you're going to get Aurelion Sol. And then you want to have Aurelion Sol in the middle, really. But then you want Jinx to be surrounded by as many people as possible as well, so put her over on this side. But yeah, you want Aurelion Sol, really. This would be at level 7. You don't need to run 7 Rebels like this. You could change things up. For instance, you could definitely add a Gangplank in, or, you know, get rid of the Ziggs and add a Gangplank, for instance. But, you know, I think, the more Rebels around Aurelion Sol, the better for his damage output and for the shielding. When it comes to items, obviously top tier is going to be Demolitionists on Aurelion Sol. Then things like Rabadons, Jeweled Gauntlet, Morello's is really good. Morello's is really good. I can't even add it to him. I don't know, Morello's is really good. Basically, you want to have AP damage on Aurelion Sol for the most part. Jinx is just going to want your usual Jinx stuff. You can have a defensive item like Trap Claw, Giant Slayer is fine. What you might end up wanting to do is eventually, if you do want to drop one of these, I would recommend that you probably drop Yasuo if you're going to drop anyone. You could basically do this, and then you could keep those 2 in, and you can add a Kayle as well. So that would give you another potential carry. Whoops. Sona, you can add in Kayle, because that'll give you another potential carry. You can give her any excess items, for instance. And that works perfectly fine. Or you can just drop one of the others. Like, you could drop Malphite if you really wanted to. And then you could go around and play something more like Chrono. So you add the Ezreal for the blasters. And then you add, I don't know, something like the Wukong, just to add a bit more CC. But, you know, I think Rebels in general is quite flexible. So I'm just going to keep it to the traditional Rebels comp, which, you know, is just the 6 Rebels plus whatever else you want. This is like the core. Rebels is very flexible. You just want 6 Rebels, and it's all about Aurelion Sol again since the buffs. So even though reroll compositions are going to be worse, I still think traditional protectors will be okay, although I don't think they'll be anywhere near as good as they used to be. But I do think traditional protectors will be fine. So the way you play traditional protectors is with Jarvan, You want Nico. So these are like your 4 core protectors, and you want to 3-star these to be like absolutely safe. These would be your 3 core protectors. And then you basically either play with 4 Mystic or you play with 4 Celestial. So you take this core and you either go for Celestial, which would include the Kassadin for the debuff, and then you'd have the Ash, which would give you 4 Celestial, 4 Protectors, which I think works okay. Or you could go for the 4 Mystic, which essentially... you'd also have Karma, so you always have Karma attached to your Xin Zhao. Or you then drop the Kassadin and the Ash, for instance, and then you go for the... actually, you know what? Because I'm going to have to link this anyway, let's stick with the Kassadin and Ash version to begin with. So this would be your 4 Celestial, and in terms of items, you just want defensive items on Xin Zhao. I think like Quicksilver is still really good. I think you want Bramble on Xin Zhao as well. A lot of people like to have Titan's Resolve on him, just because it builds up a little bit of damage. I like to have Morello's on either Nico or Rakan. I think on Nico now, because Rakan's area of effect is much lower, but Rakan is going to want like a Shojin's, and if you get Shojin's or double Shojin's, or you get Shojin's Runans, really, really good. So that would be one version of the Protector comp, so I'll label that as Protector for Celestial. Obviously, you replace the Kassadin, or you could replace the Kassadin with Lulu if you find her, which would give you 2 Mystic as well. So I'm gonna basically combine that. I don't think you need Lulu at the front lines, but you can have her somewhere to the side, for instance, like over here. You want to pace Lulu like where it's likely she's going to have impact, but let's just share that. And the other way that you could play it is you just drop the Ash and you add in the Soraka. And then you get also, what Mystic are we missing right now? We are missing 1 Mystic. Sona. So you add the Sona as well. This would be like the 4 Mystic version of this build. And then at level 9 you could add in 1 more Celestial. Depends on who you want to get pulled, really, but yeah, it doesn't really matter. That would be the 4 Mystic version. I don't think Protectors are going to be particularly strong. Just because I feel like there's going to be a lot of comps that are just better than Protectors right now, plus the rerolls have been nerfed, but I wanted to include them anyway just in case. And there is a new comp that I think a lot of people are speculating about, and it's kind of about the buffs to the 3-star, the 1-cost 3 stars. So Fiora would have to be 3-star in this. You could play Leona as well, who I think is really good. And basically, I think there's a lot of playing around that you can do, but I've heard that I think that you could play Vanguard, Chrono, Blademaster comp, all based around some strong 1-cost 3 stars. So I'm really tempted to try this particular build out because I think it could be pretty strong. So we have the Blademaster with the 2 strong Blademasters with Fiora and Xayah. Then obviously the next strongest Blademaster you want to add is an Irelia. So you've got the 3 Cybernetics with Irelia, Fiora, and Xayah. And then you're going to add essentially Chrono, okay? And also Celestial if you can. So it's basically you want to add Chrono. So obviously the best case Chrono scenarios is going to be Thresh, and then Lulu obviously for Celestial. This would give you a level 7 comp that I think is just super good. You don't need to have Thresh. Like, it could be any other Chrono realistically. It could even be Shen. That is something that you could consider. So for instance, you could actually get rid of the if you don't want to play the Irelia, you don't really have the items for her, for instance. I actually think something could be good like Shen to give you the Blademaster bonus. And then you have the Thresh, obviously, if you can get him. And we have the Xayah, of course, which is really good. And now we have the 3 Chrono, and then we want 1 more. What's the last Chrono that would be good, I think, in this situation? Probably Blitzcrank. He's probably just the best Chrono outside of that right there. So you probably then just go with Blitzcrank as well. I genuinely think this could be like a really strong composition. I'm really tempted to try it. I think itemization-wise, you are going to want static shivs on Xayah. the more the better, but 2 probably. And then you're going to want either a GA or a Trap Claw, so I'm just going to put GA for the time being. Other itemizations, I think a Guinsoo's is really good on Fiora. I think it's massively underrated. You obviously can add a Morello's to him, Spear of Shojin on Lulu, and then you kind of want anything on Leona, but I think a Bramble Vest is really strong. So that, I actually kind of want to try this comp, but it does rely on you getting some 3-star 1 costs, which might be difficult. But you only need to get 3 of them before you actually get into the late game comp. So I'm kind of excited to try this. I think it could be pretty good. This is one of my speculative compositions that might be good. We're just not sure yet, but I want to try. So I'm going to try it and see what happens. Okay, and that kind of brings everything to a close. By the way, this one was called the Pikachu Comp. I saw it on Reddit, but kind of adapted it a little bit to what I feel would be really good. So yeah, feel free. This could be interesting. I think it could be a very interesting composition. I'm going to try it and see how it works, and we'll have to see if we can make Xayah carry with 4 Chrono work. Might just be worse. Might just be strictly worse than Kayle, for instance. By the way, but it's always worth giving it a go. End of the day, this gives you the Celestial as well. But this might just be strictly worse than Kayle, so we just don't know. We need to wait and see. Obviously, we need to think about Cybernetic as well. So you could add something like at level 9 another Cybernetic to increase the power of our Cybernetic carries. But otherwise, just give it a go and try it.